Today, we explore a situation that at first appears personal but carries wider meaning. It reflects power pressure and economic imbalance. It shows how everyday life can mirror the same forces we often study in larger conflicts. It reveals how authority can form inside families and how control can exist without visible violence. It also shows how individuals push back when the line of autonomy is crossed. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. The story involves a young adult who works full-time. They live in a small apartment owned by their parents. They pay rent that fits within their budget. The arrangement seems fair. Many people around the world live in similar settings, especially as housing prices rise and wages struggle to keep pace. In many societies, adult children live with family longer than past generations did. Higher costs, limited job stability, and shifting social norms all contribute to this trend. For some families, this arrangement offers practical benefits. Parents receive steady income. Young adults save money as they build careers. Both sides support each other in ways that feel balanced. However, balance can shift quickly when expectations change or when someone uses economic dependency as a tool. The parents eventually approach their adult child with a request. They say that the child should provide daily child care for their sister who recently became a parent. At first, it sounds like an appeal for help. The sister is overwhelmed. The situation is stressful. Childcare options are limited and expensive in many nations. Working parents often find themselves without adequate support. Families in many regions respond by turning to relatives for assistance. But the request in this case is not small. The parents want the adult child to take on unpaid full-time caregiving. They expect them to restructure their own job schedule or work from home or reduce their hours. They treat the demand as if it were an obligation rather than a negotiation. When the adult child hesitates, the parents make a decision that changes everything. They link the rent payment to the caregiving role. They say the rent will go up unless the adult child accepts the duties. They present this increase as a consequence of refusing family responsibility. This transforms a request into a form of pressure. Housing becomes a lever. Financial stability becomes conditional. This is not a new tactic in human history. Access to resources has long been used to enforce compliance. Large systems do it. Small systems do it. The family unit is often the first place where people encounter power hierarchies. Parents traditionally hold authority. Adult children who depend on them face subtle pressures that shape choices and boundaries. In many homes, expectations about labor care and loyalty are treated as cultural norms rather than matters of consent. Across many societies, unpaid caregiving labor is often assigned to women or younger siblings. Even today, global studies show that unpaid childcare still falls overwhelmingly on daughters, sisters, or female relatives. The concept of free domestic labor is deeply rooted. Families may frame it as duty rather than work. They may argue that helping is natural. They may assume that one member of the family is simply better suited for caregiving. These assumptions shape decisions without being openly discussed. In this situation, the pressure becomes heavier as the parents create an ultimatum. Rent will rise soon. The deadline is firm. They insist that the adult child must accept the responsibility if they want to remain in the apartment. The parents do not consider whether the adult child can change their work schedule. They do not ask how the demand might affect long-term career development. They only focus on the immediate burden placed on the sister and the ease of placing the solution on someone close and available. The adult child begins evaluating the situation. They calculate expenses. They review their income. They look at available housing options. They think about long-term freedom. They reflect on how the pressure makes them feel. Economic leverage can create anxiety even when no physical threat is involved. Pressure like this can erode trust inside families. It can create environments where one person feels like a resource rather than a member of the household. Around the world, people face similar calculations. Young adults often choose between staying in pressured environments or seeking independence despite financial strain. Leaving home requires planning and confidence. It can also require emotional readiness. Many remain where they are because the cost of moving out is too high. Others reach a point where autonomy matters more than convenience. In this case, the adult child decides to move out. It is not a dramatic reaction. It is a strategic choice. They find a small, affordable room farther from the city center. It requires a longer commute. It takes more planning, but it gives them control over their life. It removes the threat that their living situation can be used as bargaining power. When they tell their parents, the response is shock. The parents did not expect this outcome. They believed the leverage would work. They assumed dependency would prevent resistance. They believed the adult child would choose comfort over independence. This miscalculation mirrors a common pattern in many authority systems. When leaders use pressure to enforce compliance, they often assume they hold complete control. They forget that individuals can withdraw. When a person removes themselves from the system, the leverage collapses. The parents begin to backtrack. They claim the rent increase was overstated. They insist the demand was not meant to be harsh. They say the family should not be divided over simple misunderstandings. But even as they soften their tone, the trust has weakened. The adult child sees clearly that the original expectation was not a discussion. It was an order. The choice to leave has already been made. The decision to move out has broader meaning. It reflects a global trend in which many young adults push for independence earlier than expected or later than expected, depending on economic conditions. It also shows a psychological shift. Once a person experiences autonomy and self-direction, it becomes difficult to accept environments shaped by pressure, manipulation, or conditional support. This story does not end with hostility. The adult child moves out peacefully. They continue working. They build their own routines. They discover new confidence. The parents still reach out, but the relationship changes. Without economic control, the parents adjust their approach. Conversations become more respectful. Requests sound like requests rather than demands. Pressure loses effectiveness without leverage. This situation highlights several key lessons. First, economic dependency within families can act as a form of soft power. Second, unpaid labor expectations are often normalized, even when they impose heavy burdens. Third, autonomy plays a central role in personal stability and psychological well-being. Fourth, individuals will ultimately resist systems that limit their freedom, even when those systems are wrapped in familial language. Across cultures, people navigate responsibilities, obligations, and boundaries differently. Some families handle them through open communication. Others rely on tradition. Others rely on authority. Conflict emerges when individuals define their own needs differently from what the system demands. Although this story is domestic in scale, its key themes mirror global issues: power imbalances, resource control, cultural expectations, structural pressure, human resilience. The same patterns appear in communities, states, workplaces, and international systems. Whenever authority relies on pressure, it risks losing legitimacy. Whenever individuals step away from controlling systems, they reshape the balance of power. This example also sheds light on the growing importance of autonomy among younger generations worldwide. As societies change, people increasingly prioritize mental health stability, fair treatment, and respect for boundaries. Many refuse to participate in systems that rely on exploitation, even subtle forms of it. They choose independence even when it requires sacrifice. They redefine what family support should look like. In many regions, support now includes mutual respect rather than blind obedience. It includes voluntary cooperation rather than compulsory service. It includes recognition of personal limits rather than assumption of endless capacity. These shifts reflect broader humanitarian trends. Well-being is not only about material resources. It is also about dignity, agency, and equality. This situation also reminds us that conflict does not require violence to be impactful. Silent pressures, hidden expectations, and economic threats can also create deep emotional strain. Understanding these forms of conflict helps us see how human relationships evolve and how people navigate systems of power at every level. Through this lens, the young adult's decision becomes more than a personal choice. It becomes an act of boundary setting. It becomes a refusal to allow economic leverage to define their life. It becomes a demonstration of resilience, and it becomes a reminder that systems must adapt when their members demand fair treatment. In the end, all parties adjust to the new reality. The adult child finds stability. The parents recognize that authority cannot depend on pressure. The sister explores alternative childcare options. The family dynamic changes, not in dramatic confrontation, but through a quiet rebalancing of power. This story stands as an example of how individuals can navigate unfair expectations with thoughtful analysis, persistence, and measured action. It shows that independence is a powerful tool. It shows that emotional survival often involves strategic decisions. And it shows that even in the smallest domestic spaces, the same forces that shape larger conflicts are always present. Thank you for watching.